Max was more than just a police dog. He was a symbol of loyalty, bravery, and hope for everyone who lived in Brooksville. With his sharp instincts and unshakable courage, he had helped track down missing children, protect officers during dangerous calls, and even calm scared victims during emergencies. People in the town often said Max wore an invisible cape because to them, he was a real-life superhero. On a chilly evening in early November, Max and his handler, Officer Daniels, responded to a call that would change everything. A robbery suspect had fled into the dense woods at the edge of town. Max, trained to protect and pursue, charged into the trees without hesitation. The officers followed close behind, flashlights cutting shaky paths through the darkness. Suddenly, a shot rang out. In one terrible instant, Max hurled himself toward the danger. Witnesses later said they barely saw the blur of fur before the gunman's weapon fired again. Max took the hit meant for Officer Daniels, collapsing hard onto the frozen ground. The suspect was quickly arrested, but all the officers could think about was Max, lying motionless under the towering pines. Panic swept through the team as they loaded Max into a patrol car and raced to the nearest animal hospital. Officer Daniels sat in the back seat with him, whispering urgent, broken words of encouragement the entire ride. "Stay with me, buddy. Stay with me," he repeated, his hands trembling as he stroked Max's fur. When they arrived, the veterinary staff rushed into action. Machines beeped, lights flashed, and the once powerful K9 was swallowed up by wires, IV drips, and a team fighting to keep him alive. After several hours of tense waiting, the lead veterinarian came out with a heavy look on her face. Max's injuries were severe, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and damage to his lungs. Even if he survived the night, the doctor warned, he might never walk again. The news hit the town like a thunderclap. Brooksville had celebrated Max's victories for years. His smiling face had been on community banners, his heroic deeds shared in newspapers. Now, the town's greatest protector was hanging on to life by the thinnest thread. Candles and cards started to appear outside the animal hospital. Children drew pictures of Max wearing a golden crown. Adults shook their heads sadly and spoke in hushed tones. Hope, once so bright, was starting to dim. In the cold, sterile halls of the hospital, Max lay still, a warrior brought down not by failure, but by the very bravery that had made him a legend. The next morning, the town of Brooksville seemed unusually quiet. The news of Max's condition had spread faster than the wind. In coffee shops, on sidewalks, and at schoolyards, people spoke of little else. The hero they had counted on for years was now fighting a battle he might not win. Outside the animal hospital, candles flickered in the crisp morning air. Handwritten notes taped to the glass doors read messages like, "Stay strong, Max," and our town's greatest hero. A steady stream of people came to leave flowers, dog treats, and stuffed animals. Some simply stood with bowed heads, saying silent prayers for the brave K9 who had given everything for them. Inside, Max's room was dim and heavy with worry. Machines beeped steadily, and the smell of antiseptic hung in the air. Officer Daniels sat slumped in a chair beside Max's bed, his uniform wrinkled and his eyes red from sleeplessness. He gently held Max's paw, speaking softly about all the adventures they had shared, about the lives they had saved together, about the games they played after long shifts, about the dreams they still had. The veterinarians did everything they could, but their words grew more cautious with each passing hour. They spoke of quality of life, of making kind decisions. The phrases floated around Officer Daniels like cruel whispers, ones he didn't want to hear. Deep down, he knew Max was tired. He could see it in the way the dog's chest rose and fell with great effort. Max had fought bravely, but how much more could he endure? The hospital staff gently suggested that it might be time to prepare for the worst. They talked about letting Max go peacefully, about ending his pain. Officer Daniels nodded numbly, feeling the weight of the world crushing down on him. Saying goodbye to Max felt unthinkable, but seeing him suffer was worse. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the hospital parking lot, the town gathered outside for a silent vigil. Families clutched candles, children clung to drawings of Max in superhero capes, and even old veterans saluted the building where the K-9 lay fighting for his life. Inside, Officer Daniels pressed his forehead against Max's and whispered, "If you're tired, buddy, it's okay. You've got enough. You're my hero, no matter what." Tears fell freely down his face. It was a goodbye without words, a heartbreak shared by an entire town. Outside, the candles glowed against the night sky, small flames of hope flickering stubbornly against the darkness, even as many hearts braced for the inevitable. Liam had always been a quiet boy, the kind who found comfort in the simple things. He loved reading books about heroes, playing with his dog at home, and spending time with his older sister, who often teased him about his love for all things dog-related. But none of that seemed important that day. Liam had heard the news. Like every other kid in Brooksville, he had looked up to Max, the K-9 officer who had always seemed larger than life. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a protector, a symbol of everything good in the world. Liam's parents had told him the news softly, their faces tight with worry as they explained that Max was in critical condition. He couldn't understand it fully, but he felt the loss like a punch to the stomach. That afternoon, Liam asked his mom if they could visit the animal hospital. She hesitated, but seeing the determination in her son's eyes, she agreed. "It's not just for Max, you know," she said gently, but Liam wasn't listening. He only cared about one thing, being with Max. When they arrived, Liam's mother hesitated before following him inside. She had heard what the doctors were saying, and even though she tried to keep her emotions in check, she felt the weight of the situation. The hospital was filled with a quiet kind of grief, the kind that's heavy, like an unspoken truth hanging in the air. But Liam wasn't deterred. The moment he walked into the waiting room and saw the kennel where Max lay, he felt a strange sense of purpose. He didn't know how to explain it, but he knew he couldn't just sit by and watch. He couldn't let Max, the hero, the protector of their town, slip away without doing something. Without saying a word to his mom, Liam made his way down the hall to Max's room. His small hands pressed against the cold glass as he peered into the room where Max lay hooked up to machines. The dog's once vibrant eyes were dull, and his breathing was shallow. But something inside Liam stirred. He could feel Max's pain, the way he too was fighting to hold on, not for the world, but for the few who cared. Liam didn't have a plan. He didn't know how to fix Max. But he did know this. He wasn't going to leave Max alone. Not now. Not ever. Liam slowly opened the door, stepping inside the sterile room. He whispered quietly, as if the words were a prayer. "I'm here, Max. I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, the little boy made a promise that no matter what happened, he would stand by Max. He wouldn't let the town's hero fall without a fight. The hours blurred together as Liam sat by Max's side. His small body seemed to shrink as he huddled in the cold hospital chair, but his spirit was unyielding. He spoke softly to Max, recounting the stories of their town, of the things they had hoped for, of the places they would go once Max was well again. He told Max how much everyone loved him, how much he meant to everyone, especially Liam. Liam wasn't sure if the dog could hear him. He didn't know if Max even understood the words, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't bear the thought of Max slipping away without doing everything in his power to keep him here. So, with the desperation of a boy who couldn't quite understand the way the world worked, Liam leaned forward and whispered into Max's ear. "I'll only you, Max. You're my hero. I'll stay with you, and I won't stop until you get better. I promise." His voice trembled with emotion, and his heart hammered in his chest. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. Instead, he wiped them away with the back of his hand and looked at Max with a quiet determination. This wasn't just about a dog. It was about a bond so deep, so pure, that Liam could feel it with every inch of his being. Max had been there for the town when they needed him most. He had protected them without hesitation, given everything he had, even his life. Now, it was Liam's turn to be there for him. As the night dragged on, Liam's mother checked in, bringing him food and offering to take him home for rest. But Liam wouldn't leave. He couldn't. Each time he stood up to stretch or shift in his chair, He glanced at Max, wishing the dog would open his eyes, wishing the miracle everyone had been praying for would come. But there was no miracle. There was just Liam, sitting in the quiet room with the fading light from the window casting long shadows. By midnight, the hospital was almost silent. The steady beeping of machines was the only sound, a reminder that time was slipping away. The staff had suggested to Officer Daniels that it might be time to say goodbye, but Liam's quiet presence seemed to hang in the air, a defiant reminder that sometimes hope could look like the smallest things. And then, just when it seemed like the room had gone as still as the night itself, Max's tail gave a faint, almost imperceptible thump against the blanket. Liam's breath caught in his throat. He froze, staring at Max as if the world itself had just stopped spinning. Max wasn't gone. Not yet. Liam didn't know what this meant, but he did know one thing. He wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. The days following the faint movement of Max's tail were filled with tentative hope. Officer Daniels and Liam were glued to Max's side, day and night. Each visit, each small gesture of care, felt like a thread of connection between the world that had almost lost him and the boy who wouldn't let go. Liam had returned every day without fail, as though he had made a pact with the universe. He never allowed anyone to see the tears that sometimes welled in his eyes as he watched Max struggle to breathe, but he was determined to be the one who would fight for Max when no one else could. It was one quiet afternoon when the shift in the room became more noticeable. Max's body was still weak, his eyes dull, but something about his breathing had changed. Instead of the shallow, labored gasps, there was a slight rhythm, a soft rise and fall that hadn't been there before. Liam was seated beside Max as usual, telling him all about his day. He didn't expect Max to respond. He knew the dog wasn't ready for that. But he couldn't help himself. He was speaking to Max as though nothing had ever changed, as if his friend was just sleeping. "Max," Liam whispered, "I saw a dog park today. I'm sure you'd love it. It's got so many squirrels. Maybe when you're feeling better, we can go together, and you can catch all of them." As he spoke, he gently ran his hand across Max's fur. The motion was calming, almost like a prayer. That's when it happened. Max's eyes flickered, just for a moment. At first, Liam thought it was his imagination, but then he saw it again. Max's ear twitched, the faintest sign of awareness. Liam's heart raced. Could it be? Could Max be waking up? "Max, it's me," Liam said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You're going to be okay. I promise. We're going to get through this." Liam leaned down closer, his face inches from Max. Then, almost as if Max heard the sincerity in Liam's words, the dog's paw shifted slightly. It was barely noticeable, but it was there. A faint movement that sent a surge of hope through Liam's veins. Liam blinked hard, trying to process the miracle he was witnessing. For days, the medical team had spoken of giving Max peace, and now there was a spark. It wasn't much. Not yet, but it was a sign. Liam knew Max wasn't out of the woods. He wasn't healed, but in that moment, it felt like the impossible had become possible. Max had heard him. Max had responded. "Don't worry, buddy," Liam whispered, his voice full of quiet joy. "I'll be right here. Every day, I'll be right here." With that, he gently squeezed Max's paw, his fingers warm against the coldness of the dog's body. Max wasn't finished. Neither was Liam. As the days passed, something remarkable began to happen. Max, the once vibrant canine who had been so close to death, slowly began to show signs of recovery. It was subtle at first, just a slight shift in his breathing, a small flutter of his eyelids. But to those who had stood by his side, those tiny moments were nothing short of a miracle. Liam continued to visit Max every day, his unwavering presence a quiet source of strength. Officer Daniels, who had been nearly crushed by the weight of his best friend's condition, found new hope in Liam's persistence. He watched as the young boy, with his soft words and gentle touch, managed to bring Max back from the edge of death. Nurses and doctors who had once suggested that it might be time to let Max go now found themselves astonished by the dog's slow but steady progress. At first, they dismissed it as coincidence, But as the days turned into weeks, it became clear that something extraordinary was happening. The dog's heartbeat was stronger, his breath less labored, and most surprisingly, he was responding to commands, albeit weakly. The medical team's disbelief slowly gave way to cautious optimism. It was during one of Liam's visits that the real change happened. Max was lying on his bed, his head resting on his paws, when Liam approached as he always did. The boy smiled softly, brushing his hand over the dog's fur, and whispered, "I brought you your favorite toy, Max. I'm sure you want to play with it." Liam gently placed the squeaky ball beside Max. Without thinking, the boy sat back, staring at the dog's still form. Then, as if he'd been waiting for the right moment, Max shifted his body. Slowly, with every ounce of strength he had left, Max lifted his head and nudged the ball with his nose. Liam gasped, his heart racing. "Max, you're playing." The nurse, who had been standing nearby, gasped too. She had never seen this kind of sudden spark of life in any patient. It wasn't the full recovery they had hoped for, but it was progress. Max was trying, and Liam, with his unwavering belief in patience, had somehow sparked that fight within him. The team rallied around Max's recovery. More therapy sessions were scheduled, and the veterinarians pushed to try new treatments. Everyone was cautiously optimistic, but there was no denying the profound effect Liam had on Max's healing. It was as though the dog's will to live had been reignited by the boy's promise, his presence, and the love he showed. Even the quietest corners of the hospital buzzed with the quiet excitement of something miraculous happening. Max's comeback was more than just a medical case. It was a story of resilience, of love, and of the extraordinary bond between a boy and his dog. And as Liam sat by Max's side that day, his heart swelling with pride, he knew one thing for sure. They were in this together. Max wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for the promise Liam had made. It was a crisp, clear morning when Max took his first real steps since the fateful night he had been brought into the animal hospital. For the first time in weeks, the town of Brooksville had reason to celebrate. What started as a devastating tragedy had turned into a story of hope that inspired the entire community. The news spread quickly. Max was getting better. The miracle everyone had quietly wished for was beginning to unfold before their eyes. People who had left flowers, cards, and toys for the injured K9 now filled the streets, eager to see the brave dog who had captured their hearts. Officer Daniel stood at the entrance to the animal hospital, his eyes scanning the crowd. He hadn't been able to leave Max's side since the recovery had begun, but today was different. Today, Max was coming home. It was the day the town had been waiting for. It was the day the hero would walk again. Max, though still a little shaky on his feet, was determined. Supported by a leash, he took one hesitant step, then another. His tail, which had been still for so long, wagged faintly as if it too remembered the joy of movement. Liam, who had been with Max through every moment of his recovery, was by his side, holding the leash with a gentle grip, his face lit up with pure joy. The crowd watched in awe, their hearts swelling with pride. They had seen Max fight, and now they were witnessing the strength of his comeback. Children cheered, parents applauded, and even the reporters who had covered the story from the beginning were moved by the sight of Max walking again. As Max made his way down the sidewalk, Liam crouched down beside him, whispering words of encouragement. "You're doing it, buddy. You're really doing it." Max looked up at him, his eyes full of gratitude and something deeper, a silent promise that he would always stand by Liam just as Liam had stood by him. When Max finally reached the end of the path, Officer Daniels kneeled beside him, stroking his fur with a smile that stretched from ear to ear. "You're home, Max. You're really home." The crowd erupted into applause, the sound filling the air with warmth and joy. The town, once heavy with sadness and uncertainty, now felt light with the hope of Max's recovery. Max wasn't just a police dog anymore. He had become a symbol of resilience, of unwavering love, and of the incredible power of never giving up. And at that moment, as the sun dipped low in the sky and the cheers rang out, it was clear that Max's story would live on in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. Weeks passed, and life in Brooksville, began to return to normal, though a quiet kind of magic lingered in the air. Max had made an astonishing recovery. Though he would never return to active duty as a police dog, he was still a hero to everyone in town. Max's legend, already so firmly established, had grown even stronger. Liam continued to visit Max every day, often accompanied by his family and friends. Max had become more than just a dog. He was part of their community, part of their lives. The bond between the boy and his dog had touched everyone who had witnessed their story. It was a reminder of the power of love, loyalty, and the strength of the human spirit. On the day Max's official retirement ceremony was held, the whole town turned out to celebrate. Officer Daniels, with a proud smile, stood beside Max as the town's mayor handed them a plaque. The plaque read, "In honor of K9 Max, a hero who gave everything for Brooksville and a reminder of the love that binds us all." William stood beside Max, holding the leash with both hands, his heart overflowing with pride. Max wasn't just a dog in uniform anymore. He was a symbol of the impossible made possible, of never giving up in the face of overwhelming odds. The cheers of the crowd echoed in the air, but it was Liam's voice, full of gratitude and admiration, that carried the loudest. "You did it, Max," Liam whispered, smiling as he looked down at his dog. "You're a hero. You always will be." The town cheered again, louder this time. They had seen what Max had overcome, and they couldn't help but applaud him. For many, the story of Max was a story of hope, a reminder that no matter how dark things seemed, there was always a chance for light to shine through. As the ceremony came to an end, Liam took Max for a walk around the park. The day was bright, and the air was warm. Max, though slower than before, still had the joy of being outside, of being part of the world once more. Liam laughed as Max sniffed around, his tail wagging as they walked side by side. Together, they made their way down the path, just as they had dreamed, with Max beside Liam, strong and steady. And though Max's time as a police dog had ended, his legacy lived on in the hearts of all who had known him. He had saved lives, healed wounds, and proved that even in the darkest of times, a hero could rise. For Max, the real victory was not in his return to health, but in the reminder that heroes never truly leave. They remain with us in stories, in memories, and in the love we carry for them forever.